Welcome to a special episode of At Chat State. My name is Dale Grissom. I'm your host for today, and we have a student panel that'll be joining us as well as a live audience here in the studio. And we want to say a special thank you to the Media Department and the Video 1 class for hosting this open group discussion. It's open to the community, the campus. It'll be online as well. So without further ado, our panel has a list of questions in front of them that we'll be looking at, and we'll be speaking from personal perspective, maybe opinions. It's open discussion, as I said. So we're not professionals. We're coming at it from the personal perspective only. So, panel, we're just going to do this at random, and if you guys have a comment on these questions, just let me know, and we're going to go from there. So this is not pre-scripted. Number one, in your minds, what are some of the root causes of depression or anxiety, loneliness, etc.? Maybe you look back at your own life, or maybe you know of a friend. What do you think are some of the root causes?
A lot of times depression can come from things that have happened in the past maybe, or maybe your present. It can come from if you're not happy with what's going on. I know for me, right now, I'm not where I want to be. So sometimes I can slump into a depression, but I try to come out of it. And that's where it comes from for me.
Awesome. And for myself, there was a progression. It didn't start with depression. It started with insecurities, anxiety, doubt, things like that, then loneliness even, seclusion, isolation, and then those things progress to realizing later, hey, I'm really depressed. This is a real thing that I'm dealing with, and it can even go worse than that. And that's when I realized I needed to do something about it. So that worked for me. Does anyone else have an idea of some root causes of depression, or maybe you can look in yourself and think of maybe something that triggered that? Any comments?
Yeah, I would always kind of tend to compare myself to my brothers, and that would always cause me to be a little lonely about they would always have awesome friends, and I would always not be able to get great friends like they do. I mean, nowadays I have great friends, but I would just, comparing myself to people isn't probably what I should be doing.
Comparing yourself. Does anyone else have that experience? What about in the audience even? Yes.
My mother always compares me to my sisters all the time, and they've gone on and gotten their degrees and stuff, and I'm still trying to, and I've made a couple of mistakes. I have a child and everything, and always being compared to someone, it makes you feel like you're not good enough, and if you're not doing what they're doing, it makes you just feel bad. It's like you kind of want to just forget it, because you feel like you're always going to be expected to do what they're doing, and you're not them,
Right. Okay. So now in my life, depression and anxiety were two different things for me. For depression kind of more started within. It was something that maybe a response to feelings or thoughts I was having, low about myself, whatever. And it was like a wave. It would just, take you over. But anxiety was something different. Instead of it starting from within, it usually started with circumstances. But then my response to those circumstances was one of fear and getting all nervous, shaky, whatever. And sometimes it didn't have a big physiological showing. It was just my response is something I still deal with every day. So in different ways. What about you guys? Some of the things that trigger depression. Thoughts from within for depression, or anxiety, circumstances from without. But what's your experience? It might be completely different. Does anyone have a comment about that? Let's start down here on this end. Want to?
I actually have had anxiety before. I don't know if it was necessarily from depression, but it was I used to twirl my hair a lot, and then it would fall out because I would twirl it so much, and it was an anxiety tick for me. And I don't do it anymore, but it is an obsessive compulsive disorder type thing. And luckily it doesn't happen anymore because I've kept myself busy doing other things, but that's one of my experiences with anxiety.
Wow, that's very interesting. And audience, anybody you want to flag me if you have a comment on this? What about you? What about anxiety? That's a whole nother ballgame for me. It might be the same for you. It might tie in with depression. What do you think?
I, like her, have a little piece of hair that I will tend to pull and tug at, and so the way to not do it is to kind of cut it off. It's just a little piece that I like to twirl. But in a nervous situation, tests coming up, kids getting sick, school, I notice that I do it and I'll try to stop it, but it's one of those things that you do without really thinking about doing it because you're stressed.
Right. Does anyone have a thought about what triggers, let's go back to the depression topic, something that triggers those low moments for you? For me, it's thoughts that I allow to develop in my mind. It's what I call a habit of negative thinking. Because if I let myself think that I have no value or maybe I'm not as good as somebody else that's on stage or something like that, then all of a sudden I enter into that mode, and that's what triggers it, and I've had to learn to control my thoughts through that. But for somebody else, it might be a completely different trigger. It might be medical. It might be clinical. It might need professional treatment. That's totally an option that we have that we need to consider. But does anyone else have anything that triggers depressive feelings? You have a comment about that? All right.
I don't know. For me, it's like when you compare yourself to somebody else, it goes back to that, because then you feel like you're not like them, so you're not good enough because they seem so great when in reality they could be dealing with the same things that you're dealing with and with the same like insecurity that you're dealing with.
Which reminds me of something, because that sounds a lot like sometimes what you hear from people in high school. So you guys are in college, all students at Chattanooga State and everything, or prior students, whatever. Okay. High school as well. Okay, so you understand this. Exactly. We're on the same wavelength. What about in high school? Was anxiety escalated, or depression for that matter? What were your experiences, and what would cause that? Let's hear about it.
Oh my God. Okay. So when I was in high school, and it wasn't just high school, anywhere I would go, like where I felt like I was under pressure or being judged or anything, I would get anxiety very bad. Like in the mornings on the way to school, like sometimes walking in the building, my heart would beat, just because I never knew what to expect, you know. I can't even explain it, but a lot of times if I'm walking, I could be going to church, I can go into the mall, just like the unknown. It makes my heart beat fast. And I feel like everybody's looking at me, staring at me, and then sometimes I have to like stop and realize nobody's looking at you, and I have to take deep breaths, and I get nervous for no reason, and I deal with that a lot.
I've had the exact same thing, and for me, walking through the mall was one of the biggest things for me. It was painful, literally. Sometimes Walmart, can you believe that? So, if I know somebody, if I have a familiar face, that helps. But if I don't know people, then I feel like, well, then they don't know me, so they're criticizing everything I do, and down to the way I'm dressed, down to how I walk, everything. The minuscule details get me down if I'm not really careful about that, especially at the high school age.
Right. And then another thing I was going to say about what triggers depression, I've noticed that sometimes there have been times I'll be like on Facebook, and I can see people's pictures and their lives look so good, and they're like, I'm living a good life and this and that. And if I'm feeling bad, that makes me even more depressed, because I'm like, well, why are they so happy? Why do they have nice cars and they're dressed all pretty? And it could be anything, you know, and it'll make me feel even worse sometimes, especially if I'm like just sitting at home, you know, feeling depressed, and I'm looking at everybody's life on Facebook, and they're, you know, supposedly having this good life. It'll make me feel like, well, my life sucks.
Right. Well, let's open this up a little more. What does depression feel like? What triggers it? What gets you down? What does anxiety feel like? She listed a number of things, but if you are faced with depression, how do you feel? If you had to put that into words, which was a big challenge for me. I didn't know how to do that at first, but I figured it out eventually. But for you, if you had to put that in words, what's your feeling on that? Anyone ready to go?
You feel like you don't want to be around anybody. You're at a low point. I know I have a lot of issues with weight and stuff, and I feel like I look at other people who are, you know, skinnier and stuff. But inside, I'm really a good person and outgoing. But I just had to realize that for myself on my own. But you feel like you don't want to be around anybody. You just kind of, you know, seclude yourself and stay away from people, and you just feel like you're at a low point.
Well, mine is being too skinny, so I've been trying to find somebody to trade with. But anyway. Yeah.
Though, that we have to remember that people put highlights on Facebook. It's not every day all the time, sunshine and rainbows, but that's why, you know, those are their highlights. That's what people put on Facebook.
Well, did you guys see the CNN article? I was just reading it last night, the new rollout that's coming with Facebook and the timeline of your whole life. I just read that article. How funny you guys are mentioning this, which basically shows the highlights from your life as Facebook analyzes them and as you, I guess, designate them. So that's supposed to be out. I don't know exactly when, but pretty soon. Interesting. What do you guys think about Facebook and social networking? Does that affect your view of yourself?
It doesn't affect my view for me, because that's not going to change me and who I am and what I have to do. I think for me, depression is more of my mind's always racing. I always have to be doing something, or if not, I feel like I should be doing something. So that's where I get depressed. If I'm sitting idle and I'm thinking about what I could be doing and I'm not, and I'm wasting time, that, you know, really irks me. And to see that somebody on Facebook that's, you know, living a life that doesn't have the same type of problems that I have, that doesn't bother me. It only makes me want to aim higher. And I think that the image that society has with, you know, Facebook and all kind of social medias, it is depressing a lot of people, and it's hurting a lot of families and lives.
All right, now I'd like to get an audience opinion on this. Do you think that's Facebook's fault, or do you think that's our response to what we see on Facebook, or both? And if with that, that goes to media in general, which is another follow-up question coming later. What do you guys think? You're not on camera. If you want to step up?
I think it's mainly our fault, because we can't control what other people do, but if we choose to input positive things into our life, eventually, if we keep putting enough of that, I can speak from personal experience, it begins to push the negative out.
Okay. Very interesting. Yes.
And Facebook now has really become a place to really open and slander people, and that causes a lot of depression. I know bullying is big on Facebook. People are just putting their business out there for everybody to see and naming people, and that really can hurt people. And I think people need to realize when they are posting these comments, they don't have to name names. They don't have to say certain people's names just to get their point across.
All right. Well, now let's take this to another personal route. If you look at question 4, for me, I was trapped. I couldn't fix my struggles, but I felt I couldn't tell anyone about them either. This was the whole concept of what I called being trapped in my own mind. It was a feeling that I had because I didn't know how to solve things mentally. I couldn't answer these doubts of feelings of worthlessness or whatever. I couldn't convince myself that, that wasn't the case. I have value too, And so for some reason, I really struggled with that and have for a long time. But I felt like I couldn't tell anyone about that either because I've been active on campus, whatever, and people wouldn't understand. And so they would look at my situation and just squint and say, what are you talking about? So I felt trapped, if that makes sense, trapped in my own mind, so to speak, in that area. So why do we keep things in? And with that, does talking help? What about talk therapy? What do you guys think? Keeping things in, brother?
Well, for me, I've been keeping things in pretty much my whole life, so that's the only downfall of me and my depression, because I always had to be the best person doing this, the person doing that, and me holding it in so long, it hits one certain point to where you got so much on your back till you just explode, and then you just take it out on everybody, your mom, your family. But me talking to my girlfriend or anything, is somebody to listen, it always helps to get an extra opinion on your depression. So.
Right. And for me, it kind of turned into a tiered approach where I started looking at things myself, just asking myself some questions, and then talking to friends. Because if they understood, wow, at least I wasn't alone, at least maybe, this kind of makes sense somehow. And then it turned into, well, hey, if there's some friends that understand, you kind of have to pick your friends wisely sometimes on that topic, but then, well, maybe somebody at school or even parents or somebody might understand as well that maybe I hadn't even thought to talk to you about. Like our whole Project Ahead here on campus, and counselors, background in counseling, that they're not there to diagnose you or give you medicine. They're not going to turn you into a mental health case. They're there to listen. And if they have advice for you of the next step that you might need to take, at least you'll know. You know what I'm saying? So help to talk. Other comments? What about talking? Does that help?
Personally, I think it really does. Because, it helps you sort things out to get to the root of what's actually bothering you. Because, personally, I have a tendency to say, oh, I don't think anything's wrong, when obviously I'm emotionally upset, and kind of continue on with everything else but what's really getting at me subconsciously. But when I talk to other people about it, especially my parents, because my dad actually is a counselor, I always find out, oh, I didn't even realize that was bothering me to begin with, and then I'm actually able to appropriately address it and turn it into positive thinking and continue on from there.
Isn't it interesting how help can be right beside you, like your dad being a counselor? My dad also works with the homeless in the city and counsels all the time, but I didn't think to go to him about a lot of things until I was a month in, or if I ever mentioned it to him. And he had plenty of awesome counsel. I had a great family, faith, friends, awesome school, but I didn't think, I want to go around